guys, greetings to all and welcome back to another video of our channel Doctors. So in today's video we will be completing the chapter The Biological Classification in 40 easy pointers, just the way we completed the living world. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. So without wasting much time, let us begin with our pointers. And our pointer number 1 is Aristotle was the earliest to attempt a more scientific basis for classification. He used simple morphological characters to classify plants into trees, shrubs, and herbs. He also divided animals into two groups, those which had red blood and those which did not, which means those which had RBCs and those which did not have RBCs. Then we have the two kingdom classification given by Carolus Linnaeus. He classified into two kingdoms, that is plants and animals, into kingdoms called Plantae and Animalia respectively. What we learn in today's time is the 5 kingdom classification given by R.H. Whitaker, but before that we've also had the 3 kingdom classification and 4 kingdom classification, which you should know for a basic knowledge. I have written that on one page. So we have the earliest attempt of classification, which was done by Aristotle, which we just learned. He used morphological characteristics to classify plants into trees, shrubs and herbs. That is, the tallest plants were placed into trees, then the shorter ones were placed into shrubs, and the shortest ones were placed into herbs. Then we have the two kingdom classification given by Carolus Linnaeus, which were classified into two kingdoms, that is Plantae and Animalia. Then we have the 3 kingdom classification given by Haeckel into 3 kingdoms, that is Protista, Animalia and Plantae. I will tell you in detail about Protista and the other kingdoms in the further part of the chapter. Then we have the 4 kingdom classification given by Copeland, which consisted of Monera, Protista, Plantae and Animalia. Then finally the one that we will focus mainly on is the 5 kingdom classification given by R.H. Whitaker, which consisted of Monera, Protista, Plantae, Fungi and Animalia. Let us now move on to our pointer number 2. So here this table is a pointer number 2, but I will not be teaching you this table now because we've not learned the kingdoms. So once we finish each kingdom, I will then go through the table. So let's move on to pointer number 3. And pointer number 3 is R.H. Whitaker in 1969 proposed a 5 kingdom classification. The date here is quite important, so make sure you remember it. The kingdoms defined by him were, as we already learned, Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae and Animalia, and the main criterion used for classification by him included the cell structure, body organization, mode of nutrition, reproduction and phylogenetic relationship. They've many times asked the criterion used by R.H. Whitaker, so this point is very important. The continuation of pointer number 3 is the 3-domain system has also been proposed that divides the kingdom Monera into 3 domains. So out of the 3 domains, 2 domains are included in kingdom Monera, that is Archaebacteria and Eubacteria, that we will be learning ahead, leaving the eukaryotic kingdoms in the 3rd domain, and thereby we've now had a 6 kingdom classification, that is Monera consisting of all the prokaryotic organisms, that is primitive organisms, and the other 4 kingdoms consisting of all the eukaryotic organisms, that is true organisms. I hope you are clear with pointer number 3, so I will now move on to pointer number 4 and kingdom Monera. And here is a pointer number 4. We will now begin with kingdom Monera. Bacteria are the sole members of kingdom Monera. Bacteria occur almost everywhere. Pointer number 5. Bacteria are grouped under 4 categories based on their shape. The spherical ones, coccus. I've written one example for each. Streptococcus. Rod-shaped bacillus, example lactobacillus. Then comma-shaped vibrio, example Vibrio cholerae. And spiral-shaped spirulum, for example Spirulum volutans. I hope you are clear with point 4 and 5. I will now move on to point 6. So pointer number 6 were already the examples, so I will now move on to pointer number 7, which is very important. Though the bacterial structure is very simple, they have a very complex in behavior, which I've also written in a red pen, which means it is very important that though bacteria have a very simple structure, they are very complex in behavior. That is, compared to many other organisms, bacteria as a group show the most extensive metabolic diversity. By metabolic diversity, I mean that they can either make their own food and be called autotrophs, they can either depend on other organisms and be called heterotrophs, they can also feed on dead organic matter and be called saprotrophs, and they can also live inside or on different organisms and be called parasitic. So therefore they show an extensive diversity in their metabolism. I hope you are all clear with pointer number 7. So I will now move on to the two domains that we learned of kingdom Monera, that is Archaebacteria and Eubacteria. So Archaebacteria live in some of the most harsh habitats such as extreme salty areas halophiles, hot springs thermoacidophils, and marshy areas methanogens. So there are PYQs asked on what are organisms that live in extreme salty areas called, and you have various options. So halophiles will be the correct option. Then what are the organisms living in hot springs called? So your answer will be thermoacidophils. Then what are the organisms living in marshy areas or the ruminant of or the gut of ruminant animals called? Then your answer will be methanogens. Pointer number 9 is, which is very important, Archaebacteria differ from other bacteria. Now you will be having a question, why is Archaebacteria called false bacteria? It is because of its different cell wall structure, and this cell wall is responsible for its survival in such extreme conditions. Now you see other organisms like us cannot survive in such conditions, but these bacteria can, and the reason behind that is its cell wall structure. And pointer number 10 is methanogens are present in the gut of ruminant animals. According to your recollection, methanogens are the organisms that live in marshy areas. M for methanogens, M for marshy areas. Ruminant animals such as cows and buffaloes, and they are responsible for biogas production, that is methane, from the dung of these animals. So there can be multiple questions asked, as the first one, as I told you, what are organisms living in extreme salty areas called? 2. What is the feature of Archaebacteria that helps them living in such extreme conditions? So your answer will be their cell wall. And then which organisms are present in the gut of ruminant animals, and who are responsible for the production of methane? Then your answer will be methanogens or Archaebacteria. I hope you are all clear with Archaebacteria. And one more point is that they are obligate anaerobes, that is they cannot live in areas where there is oxygen. They live in oxygen exhibit areas. I hope you are all clear with Archaebacteria and have mentioned all the PYQs that are asked about Archaebacteria. So I will now move on to Eubacteria. The word eubacteria means true bacteria. Now mostly students get it wrong, as they think since they are true bacteria they may be eukaryotic. They are not eukaryotes, they are prokaryotes. Even Archaebacteria are prokaryotes. They just have a true cell wall, therefore they are called eubacteria. As I mentioned before, they show the maximum diversity in their metabolism. So they can either be autotrophs or they can either be heterotrophs. And in autotrophs they can either be photosynthetic autotrophs or they can be chemosynthetic autotrophs. Photosynthetic autotrophs are just like plants. They even have a chlorophyll A pigment similar to green plants, and they are called cyanobacteria, also called as blue-green algae. Now such cyanobacteria can either be unicellular or colonial. When they are colonial, they will usually be surrounded by a gelatinous sheath or a mucilaginous sheath to protect them from the damage caused by water. They can even fix atmospheric nitrogen due to the presence of specialized cells called heterocysts, as you can see here. For example, Nostoc and Anabina, many times they've asked examples based on eubacteria that can fix atmospheric nitrogen. So remembering Nostoc and Anabina is very important. Then I will move on to chemosynthetic autotrophs. They use the chemicals present in the soil, that is inorganic substances such as nitrates, nitrites and ammonia, and use the energy from their ATP production. They even play an important role in recycling nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, iron and sulfur. We will then move on to heterotrophic bacteria, which depend on other organisms for their food. Majority of heterotrophs are decomposers. Remember that decomposers include majority of heterotrophic bacteria. They are helpful in making curd from milk, production of antibiotics and fixing nitrogen in legume, for example rhizobium. But some eubacteria are pathogens and they cause damage to human beings, crops, farms or animals and pets. For example, some cause cholera, typhoid, tetanus, citrus canker are some well diseases caused by bacteria. Even this point is important. They can give you a number of diseases and tell you to find out which out of them is a bacterial disease. So remember, cholera, typhoid, tetanus and citrus canker are some examples of bacterial diseases. Pointer number 5 is they reproduce mainly by fission. This is a PYQ, that bacteria reproduce mainly by fission. Now they reproduce sexually by adopting a primitive type of DNA transfer from one bacterium to the other, which is called as conjugation. I repeat, this pointer number 15 is very important, and pointer number 16 is the most important out of all. that mycoplasma are the organisms that completely lack a cell wall. Remember, they lack a cell wall. They are the smallest living cells known, and they are anaerobic, that is, they can survive without oxygen. And many mycoplasma are pathogenic in animals as well as plants. So 4 important never forgettable points about mycoplasma are that they are the smallest living organisms known, they completely lack a cell wall, they are anaerobic, that is can survive without oxygen, and they are pathogenic in both animals as well as plants. So now that we finished learning kingdom Monera, let us go through its table real quick. Now these are all the criteria that were used by R.H. Whitaker, which we learnt here in his 5 kingdom classification. The first criteria was cell type, and as I told you, kingdom Monera includes all the bacteria and they are all prokaryotes. Even RK and U all are prokaryotic, that is primitive organisms. They do not have a true nucleus. So cell type will be prokaryotic, then their cell wall is non-cellulosic, that is it is made up of a polysaccharide, in which in our further chapters we will be learning about NAG and NAN. Then since they are prokaryotic, since they have a primitive nucleus, therefore they do not have a nuclear membrane. Body organization is also cellular, that is they do not have tissue level organization. Then mode of nutrition, as I told you, they show the maximum diversity in their metabolism, therefore they can be autotrophic, in which they show chemosynthetic autotrophs or photosynthetic autotrophs. Remember, photosynthetic autotrophs are also called cyanobacteria. And then in heterotrophic organisms, they can either be saprophytic or parasitic. Saprophytic means they live on decaying organic matter, and parasitic means they live on or inside other organisms. I hope you are all clear with Monera, so we will now begin with kingdom Protista. And similarly, after finishing with that kingdom, we will come back to its table. Now, as you remember that Monera consists of all the prokaryotic bacteria, kingdom Protista consists of all single-celled eukaryotes under Protista. Now again, students get it wrong that since the name is Protista, students think that it consists of all the prokaryotes. But no, kingdom Monera consists of all the prokaryotes. After kingdom Monera, all the kingdoms have eukaryotes, that is true organisms which have true cell organelles and a true nucleus. So important pointer about kingdom Protista is pointer number 17, and whose continuation is that this kingdom forms a link with others dealing with plants, animals and fungi. Again, this is a PYQ, that which kingdom forms a link between other kingdoms, and your answer will be kingdom Protista. Pointer number 17 again is it has no well-defined boundaries and therefore it is used as a link between different kingdoms. Pointer number 18 is protists reproduce asexually and sexually by a process involving cell fusion and zygote formation. Now that you have got an overall idea of kingdom Protista, I will now move on to the 5 parts of kingdom Protista, that is chrysophytes, dinoflagellates, euglenoids, slime molds and protozoans. First, beginning with chrysophytes, I have 5 most important points written down here of chrysophytes, and once you learn all these 5 points, you will be knowing everything about chrysophytes. The first point is that they have a soap box like structure. What do I mean by soap box like structure? That is, they have 2 cell walls which fit into each other like a soap box. So they have 2 thin overlapping shells which fit into each other like a soap box. Pointer number 2 is their cell walls are embedded with silica, and therefore they are indestructible. Since they are embedded with silica, they are very strong and hence their walls cannot be destructed, therefore they are called indestructible. Pointer number 3 is they form diatomaceous earth, and the accumulations of their cell walls over the year forms a layer that is called as diatomaceous earth. It is called diatomaceous because they include diatoms and golden algae called desmids. So diatoms से we get diatomaceous earth. Then these organisms are used in polishing, filtration of oils and syrups, and diatoms are the chief producers in ocean. So these are the 5 most important points about chrysophytes. Now we will do it from the paragraph 1, that is they have a soap box like structure, that is they have, remember, 2 overlapping shells which fit in like a soap box. 2, that their walls are embedded with silica and hence are indestructible. 3, their depositions have led to the formation of diatomaceous earth. 4, that they are used in polishing, filtration of oils and syrups, and 5, that is they are the chief producers in oceans. Examples of chrysophytes will be diatoms and golden algae, which are also called desmids. Remember, they are plant-like protozoans, therefore they can make their own food through photosynthesis. I will now begin with the next group of protista, that is dinoflagellates. Now I have written plant-like, animal-like, fungi-like is because they show a link between different kingdoms and therefore they show little characteristics of those kingdoms. So dinoflagellates are also plant-like protists. Again, I have written 4 most important points of dinoflagellates here at the top. One, that is they have 2 flagella, one which is longitudinal and the other which is transverse. Remember, they have 2 flagella, one which runs longitudinally and the other which runs transversely and which gives them a whirling whip-like movement, example in Guanolax. Then they have stiff cellulosic plates. Just like chrysophytes had silica embedded, they have stiff cellulosic plates. Third, they are responsible for red tides in oceans, for example Guanolax. And fourth, they produce a lot of toxins which can even kill other marine animals such as fishes. I will now read these points from the paragraph which were included in pointer number 20, and they appear in several colors, that is yellow, green, brown, blue, red, depending on the pigments that are present in their cells. They are marine and photosynthetic, and therefore I told you they are plant-like. The cell wall has stiff cellulosic plates on the outer surface. They have 2 flagella, one which lies longitudinally and the other which lies transversely. Third, the red dinoflagellates, example Guanolax. They can ask you in NEET that give an example of a red dinoflagellate and your answer will be Guanolax. They undergo rapid multiplication, that they make the sea appear red, which leads to a phenomenon called as red tides. So one organism which is responsible for red tides is dinoflagellate Guanolax. Then they release toxins which may kill other marine animals such as fishes. I hope you are all clear with dinoflagellates, so I will now move on to the next group, that is euglenoids. As we learnt that chrysophytes and dinoflagellates were plant-like, that is they were photosynthetic. Similarly, euglenoids are both plant-like and not plant-like. That is, instead of a cell wall, they have a protein-rich layer called as pellicle, which makes their body flexible. Let us recollect, chrysophytes had silica in their cell wall, dinoflagellates had stiff cellulosic plates, and euglenoids have pellicle instead of a cell wall, which helps in their flexibility. They again have 2 flagella, but this time these 2 flagella do not run longitudinally and transversely like dinoflagellates, but one is short whereas the other one is long. Now why they are both plant-like and non-plant-like is the reason. Though they are photosynthetic in the presence of sunlight, when they are deprived of sunlight, they behave like heterotrophs by predating on smaller organisms. That is, if you give them sunlight, they will make their own food, and in the absence of sunlight, they will predate on other smaller organisms for food. And interestingly, even they have pigments identical to those present in higher plants. So we learnt about cyanobacteria and euglenoids. They both have pigments identical to that of higher plants, and our example is euglena. As you can see here, one flagella is short and the other flagella is long. I hope you are all clear with euglenoids. So I will now move on to slime molds. Slime molds are fungi-like protists. That is, they are saprophytic. Again, saprophytic means that they depend on the decaying matter, that is dead material of other organisms for food. Their body moves along decaying twigs and leaves engulfing organic material. Then under suitable conditions they form an aggregation called plasmodium. Remember that aggregation is called plasmodium, and plasmodium does not have cell walls, which may grow and spread over a several field. During unfavorable condition, the plasmodium differentiates and forms fruiting bodies bearing spores at their tips. Now remember, these spores have true walls, and these walls are indestructible, and therefore they are extremely resistant and survive over many years. The spores are dispersed by air currents. This is again very important, that the spores are dispersed by air currents. And one more thing that you should remember is that a plasmodium is formed under suitable conditions, and under unsuitable or unfavorable condition the plasmodium differentiates to form fruiting bodies. And remember that these fruiting bodies, they bear spores at their tips. Again, the spores are bared at their tips, and the spores have true cell walls, and the spores are dispersed by air currents. I have mentioned all the PYQs that are asked about slime molds, so I will now move on to protozoans. So protozoans are also called animal-like protists because they are heterotrophs and they live as predators or parasites. They are also believed to be primitive relatives of animals, and they are divided into 4 major groups, that is amoeboid protozoans, flagellated protozoans, ciliated protozoans, and sporozoans. First is amoeboid protozoans. These organisms live in fresh seawater or moist oil. They move and capture their prey by putting out pseudopodia or false feet, as in amoeba. We've all learnt about amoeba in our earlier standards, that they have false feet called pseudopodia, and therefore they are called amoeboid protozoans. Marine forms also have silica shells on their surface. Some of them, such as entamoeba, are parasites. We will learn in our further standard that entamoeba histolytica causes a disease called amoebiasis, and hence it is a endoparasite. I hope you are all clear with amoeboid protozoans. So I will now move on to flagellated protozoans. Now these protozoans, by the name, as you can understand, they will have flagella, and therefore they are called flagellated protozoans. Their example is trypanosoma, which causes a disease called sleeping sickness, and its vector is a tsetse fly. Again, only examples are important. So example of flagellated protozoans is trypanosoma. They have flagella. They are parasitic and cause diseases, that is sleeping sickness by trypanosoma, whose vector is tsetse fly. Vector means a organism which carries the disease but does not cause a disease. Next is ciliated protozoans. Again, from its name you can know it will have cilia. Again, its example is paramecium, which we know looks like a slipper. It has small cilia all over its body surface. These are aquatic, actively moving organisms because of the presence of thousands of cilia. They have a cavity called gullet that opens to the outside of the cell surface. Then they have coordinated movement of rows of cilia, which causes the water laden with food to be steered into the gullet. Again, important is the example, which is paramecium, and important is that they have a cavity called gullet. Next is sporozoans, means which reproduce by spores or have a spore-like stage in their life cycle, which is infectious. Example is plasmodium, which is a malarial parasite and causes malaria, a disease which has staggering effect on human population. I hope you all know what malaria is, and if no, we will learn that in our next chapters. I hope you are all clear with kingdom Protista. So I will now move on to the table of kingdom Protista. Let's just quickly go through the table. Again, here are the characteristics that were used by R.H. Whitaker. As I told you before, Monera is the only kingdom that consists of prokaryotes. So after Monera, as you can see, everyone consists of eukaryotes. That is, all the organisms will be having true cell organelles and a nuclear membrane. So again, here the cell wall is present in some because it is present in the organisms which are plant-like. It is not present in the organisms which are not plant-like. Then since they are eukaryotic, they will have a nuclear membrane. They show cellular level of body organization, and as we saw, they also can be autotrophic or heterotrophic depending on whether they are plant-like or animal-like. I hope you are all clear with kingdom Protista. So I will now begin with kingdom Fungi. And pointer number 24 is fungi constitute a unique kingdom of heterotrophic organisms. That is, the white spots seen on mustard leaves are due to a parasitic fungi. Even the common mushrooms we eat are also fungi. Some unicellular example of fungi are yeast, which are used to make bread and beer. Other fungi may cause diseases in plants and animals, like wheat, that is a rust causing Puccinia, is also an important example. Fungi are even sources of antibiotics, for example penicillium. They are cosmopolitan, that is occur everywhere in air, water, soil, on animals and also on plants. They grow in warm and humid places. Their body consists of long, slender, thread-like structure called hyphae. Network of hyphae is known as mycelium. I repeat again, they consist of long, slender, thread-like structures which are called hyphae, and a network of hyphae is called a mycelium. In some fungi, the hyphae may be continuous and filled with multinucleated cytoplasm, and such hyphae are called as cenocytic hyphae. So cenocytic hyphae are multinucleated hyphae. Others have septate or cross walls in their hyphae. The cell walls of fungi are composed of chitin and polysaccharides. So this was a pointer number 25. As I mentioned before, they are heterotrophic, and in heterotrophs they are saprophytic, that is, they depend on organic material of dead organisms. They can also be parasites. That is, they can be symbionts in association with algae such as lichens and in association with the roots of higher plants, for example mycorrhiza. All these points present in this paragraph I have mentioned in pointers here on the left side. As you can see, the only unicellular fungi, that is yeast, it used in the preparation of bread and beer. Then the one fungi which causes wheat rust, Puccinia, fungi which causes smud, Osteligo, fungi which is parasitic in mustard, for example albugo. Then symbiotic association of fungi plus algae is called lichens, whereas symbiotic association of fungi plus root is called mycorrhiza. Example, mycorrhizal association is seen in pinus roots, and in antibiotics we commonly know penicillin. Let us now move on to the reproduction in fungi. Now reproduction in fungi can be both by vegetative means, asexual means as well as sexual means. By vegetative means it is by fragmentation, fission and budding, whereas asexually they reproduce with the help of asexual spores. For example, Conidia, sporangiospores or zoospores, and sexually by oospores, ascospores and basidiospores. Now these various spores are produced in distinct structures called fruiting bodies. The life cycle of fungi consists of 3 steps: plasmogamy, karyogamy and meiosis in the zygote. Plasmogamy, as we know, plasmo means cytoplasm, gamy means fusion. So this is the fusion of the protoplasm of the motile or non-motile gametes. Then karyogamy, as we know, karyo means nucleus, gamy means fusion. So fusion of the nuclei of the 2 gametes. And after the fusion of the nuclei, as we know, it results into the formation of the zygote, and meiosis in zygote to form the haploid spores. I hope you are all clear with the sexual cycle of kingdom fungi and the 3 steps involved in it. So I will now move on to the divisions, but before that I want you to get clear with 2 terms, that is dikaryon and dikaryon phase. Now in some divisions of kingdom fungi, that is ascomycetes and basidiomycetes, there is a small stage that is present between plasmogamy and karyogamy, and that stage is called as the dikaryotic stage, that is N plus N, in which 2 nuclei occur in each cell. This stage is called the dikaryon stage, and this condition is called as the dikaryon condition. Again, what is important to know that each cell will have 2 nucleus, and it is seen only by the fungi present in the division ascomycetes and basidiomycetes. I hope you are all clear. So I will now move on to the 4 divisions of kingdom fungi. I did not study the 4 divisions from the textbook, but I made a table, and it was very easy to remember all the things from the table, and all questions, all PYQs will always come from this table itself. So here are some characteristics that we will be focusing on, that is the mycelium structure, the fruiting body, asexual spores, sexual spores and their examples. So first we will talk about Phycomycetes. In Phycomycetes, the mycelium is aseptate. During the introduction of kingdom fungi, I told you in some fungi the hyphae do not have septa, that is they do not have cross wall, due to which it leads to the formation of a multinucleated cytoplasm, and such cytoplasm is called as cenocytic hyphae. So one point you will remember is that only Phycomycetes in all the divisions of fungi has an aseptate hyphae, and it is cenocytic. Rest all are septate and hence are not cenocytic. I am repeating again, only Phycomycetes is aseptate and cenocytic. Rest all are septate and branched. Then fruiting body is absent in Phycomycetes. They have asexual spores. They can either be motile, that is zoospore. Remember, zoospore does not mean sexual spore. Zoospore means motile spores. And non-motile spores, for example, aplanospores. Then they have a special type of sexual spore, that is zygospore or oospore, which are produced endogenously. Now there are questions asked, whereas the zygospore or oospore found in Phycomycetes is endogenous or exogenous. So remember that it is endogenous, and the examples are Rhizophus, Albugo and Mucor. As we already learnt in the pointers that I had written in the introduction part, that Albugo is mustard fungi. You can also remember these 3 examples by the mnemonic RAM, where R in RAM stands for Rhizophus, which is a bread fungus. A in RAM stands in Albugo, which is a mustard fungus, and M in RAM stands for Mucor. I hope you are all clear with Phycomycetes. So I will now move on to the second division of fungi, that is Ascomycetes. As I mentioned before, mycelium is only aseptate in Phycomycetes, and all the others will have septate and branched mycelium. As fruiting body was absent in Phycomycetes, But in Ascomycetes, fruiting body is present and it is called an ascocarp. This fruiting body produces asexual spores called conidia. Exogenously they are produced, whereas sexual spores called ascospores. Ascospores are produced endogenously because asco means sac. So we keep things inside a sac, therefore ascospores are also formed inside the ascocarp and hence they are called endogenous spores. Their examples are Aspergillus, yeast, which is the only unicellular fungi, penicillin, claviceps, Neurospora. Neurospora is also called as the Drosophila of the animal kingdom, plus morels and truffles, which are used as delicacies. And remember, Ascomycetes and Basidiomycetes show the dikaryon stage, that is N plus N in each cell. Remember, this is only shown by Ascomycetes and Basidiomycetes, not by Phyco and Deuteromycetes. I hope you are all clear about Ascomycetes, so I will now move on to Basidiomycetes. We've already memorized that the mycelium of Basidiomycetes is septate and branched, as Ascomycetes has a fruiting body called ascocarp. Similarly, Basidiomycetes will have a fruiting body called basidiocarp. They are also called as puff balls. In Basidiomycetes, asexual spores are absent and sex organs are also absent, but the basidiocarp, they bear sexual spores called basidiospores, which are produced exogenously. So remember, in Phycomycetes and Ascomycetes, the spores are produced endogenously, whereas in Basidiomycetes, the sexual spores are produced exogenously. For example, Asteligio, which is smut, Puccinia, which is wheat rust, and Agaricus, which we commonly call mushroom. Again, Basidiomycetes show this dikaryon stage, that is N plus N in each cell. I hope you are all clear with Basidiomycetes. So I will now move on to Deuteromycetes, also called as imperfect fungi. We've already memorized that its mycelium is also septate and branched. They do not show any fruiting body. That's the reason they are called imperfect fungi, because their sexual mode of reproduction is not yet found. Therefore, they are placed in a separate kingdom, that is imperfect part. Then asexually they reproduce by conidia, just like Ascomycetes. They also show a vegetative phase. Some examples are Alternaria, Trichoderma, and Coleotrichum. Remember, Alternaria is responsible for early blight of potato, and Coleotrichum is responsible for red rot of sugarcane. I hope this table helped you a lot. So I will now move on to the next part of the chapter. Before moving to that, I want you to get familiar with certain examples. Here is an example of mucor, which was an example of Phycomycetes, as we learnt in RAM. This is an example of Aspergillus. As you can see it is bearing conidia exogenously. So if you do not remember the points, you can recollect the diagram and see, as it has these spores exogenously. These exogenous spores are called conidia. And this delicious mushroom, that is Agaricus, is included in Basidiomycetes. One thing I forgot to mention is that claviceps and Neurospora are also examples of Basidiomycetes, and Neurospora is extensively used in genetic work, and as I told you, morels and truffles are considered as edible delicacies. So that is all I wanted to mention. I hope you are all clear with kingdom fungi. So I will now move on to the next part, that is viruses, viroids, prions, and lichens. Now kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia we will be learning in detail in the next chapters 3 and 4. Let us start with virus. But what is virus? Viruses are non-cellular organisms that are characterized by having an inert crystalline structure outside the living cell. What do I mean by an inert crystalline structure outside the living cell? It means that the virus causes diseases only once it enters a cell. Before it is outside the cell, it will not cause you any diseases, but once it enters the cell, it will start causing you diseases. I hope you are all clear with what viruses are. Remember, viruses are non-cellular and they are inert and crystalline outside the living cell. Now that you're clear what viruses are, let us now move on to certain scientists that discovered viruses and conducted various experiments on them. So the first is that the name virus, that means venom or poisonous fluid, was given by Pasteur DJ Ivanowski in the year 1892, and he recognized certain microbes as casual organisms of the mosaic tobacco disease, which is caused by the tobacco mosaic virus, TMV. Now let us talk a bit about tobacco mosaic virus. It has RNA as its genetic material. Mostly all the plant viruses have RNA, and mostly all the animal viruses have DNA as their genetic material. It has these structures called as caspids. These caspids have these small caspomeres, which in case of tobacco mosaic virus are 2130 in number. I hope you are all clear about TMV. So I will now move on to the next scientist, that is M.W. Brezhnev. These were found to be smaller than bacteria because they passed to the bacteria proof filters. So one more important point is that first, viruses are non-cellular. 2, that is they are inert outside the living cell. 3, that is they are smaller than bacteria and hence pass through the bacterial filters. M.W. Brezhnev in 1898 demonstrated that the extract of the infected plants of tobacco could cause infection in healthy plants and called this fluid contagium vivum fluidum, which means infectious living fluid. So most of the time they ask questions like who discovered or who gave the name virus, then it was Pasteur DJ Ivanowski. Then who coined the term contagium vivum fluidum, it will be M.W. Brezhnev. Or who found the fluid present in them, then that is contagium vividum fluidum, again M.W. Brezhnev. And then they ask who crystallized viruses and said that the crystals consist of largely proteins, then it will be W.M. Stanley. So there are 3 scientists, and I will now move on to pointer number 32, which is viruses also contain genetic material that could be either RNA or DNA, but remember no virus will contain both RNA or DNA. Then a virus is a nucleoprotein and the genetic material is infectious. In general, viruses that infect plants, as I told you, will have single-stranded RNA, and viruses that infect animals will usually have single or double-stranded RNA or double-stranded DNA. Again, an important pointer number 33, bacterial viruses or bacteriophages. Bacteriophages are nothing but viruses that eat bacteria, that phage on bacteria. Viruses that infect bacteria are usually double-stranded DNA viruses. Remember, bacteriophage have a genetic material which is double-stranded DNA. Here you can see the structure of a bacteriophage, whereas the tobacco mosaic virus, as we learned before, it has a genetic material single-stranded RNA. Let us revise again. Tobacco mosaic virus TMV has genetic material single-stranded RNA, and bacteriophage, that is virus which infects bacteria, has a genetic material double-stranded DNA. As I told you before, the protein coat of TMV is called caspid, and it is made up of small subunits called caspomeres, which are 2130 in number. It protects the nucleic acid, that is RNA. These caspomeres are arranged in helical or polyhedral geometric forms, as you can see. Viruses cause diseases like mumps, smallpox, herpes, and influenza. Remember, in the earlier part of the chapter we had learnt about bacterial diseases, that is citrus canker, typhoid, cholera, and here is a list of viral diseases, that is mumps, smallpox, and herpes, and influenza. Even AIDS is a viral disease which is caused in humans by a virus. In plants, the symptoms can be mosaic formation, leaf rolling, curling, yellowing, and vein clearing, dwarfing, and stunted growth. Some important questions asked from this part I have all mentioned here. First, virus, it was discovered by Louis Pasteur DJ Ivanowski. Second, as I told you, all plants have RNA as the genetic material with the exception of CFMV, that is cauliflower mosaic virus. Then all animal viruses have DNA as the genetic material except retrovirus, rhinovirus, and cubiphage. Then let's talk about TMV. TMV was found by DJ Ivanowski, that is Pasteur DJ Ivanowski. Then the term contagium vivum fluidum was given by M.W. Brezhnev, and it was crystallized by W.M. Stanley. Please remember the dates because they are important. Found in the year 1892. The term contagium vivum fluidum was given in the year 1898, and it was crystallized by W.M. Stanley in the year 1935. Now that you are all clear about viruses, let us move on to the last part, that is viroids, prions, and lichens. Let us now begin with viroids. Viroids were discovered in the year 1971 by Theo Dinner. You can also remember him as Todd. He discovered a new infectious agent that was smaller than a virus and caused potato spindle tuber disease. It was found to be a free RNA, that is, it lacked a protein coat that is found in normal viruses, and hence it got the name viroid. The RNA of the viroid was of low molecular weight. So some very important points that you must remember is, first, that viroids are smaller than viruses. 2, that it lacks a protein coat. 3, it has a free RNA. And 4, that is, its RNA is of low molecular weight. Please do not forget these points, because these points have been asked in many PYQs. I hope you are all clear. And an example of viroids is potato spindle tuber disease, also called as PSTD. I will now move on to prions. Prions are agents which are considered to be of abnormally folded proteins. So in it they will usually ask you an abnormally folded protein is called as a prion. The agent was similar in size to viruses. Remember, viroids were smaller than viruses, but prions are similar in size to viruses. These agents were called prions, and they cause two diseases, that is bovine spongiform encephalopathy BSE, also called as mad cow disease in cattle, and it is also quite similar to the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in humans. So viroids cause potato spindle tuber disease, that is PSTD, and prions cause BSE, that is bovine spongiform encephalopathy, and CJD, that is Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in humans. Remember, BSE is, or mad cow, is found in cattle, whereas CJD is found in humans. I hope you are all clear about viroids and prions. So I will now move on to lichens. Lichens are another important part of this chapter. They are symbiotic associations, as we already learnt, between fungi and algae. The algal component is called as the phycobiont, but because it performs photosynthesis and provides food to the fungal component, which is called as mycobiont, which are autotrophic and heterotropic respectively. That is, the algae part is autotrophic and fungi are heterotropic. Algae prepare food for fungi, and fungi provide shelter and absorb mineral nutrients from water for its partner. So their close association, that is, one saw a lichen in nature, we will not be able to imagine that it is made up of two different organisms. One important pointer is that lichens are very good pollution indicators, that is, they will not be found in areas where there is a lot of pollution. Therefore in metropolitan cities we do not see many lichens, whereas in villages there are lichens seen. There are another important points I've mentioned here, short points which you can use to revise the chapter completely. That is, viroids found by Theodiner. Example is PSTD, that is potato spindle tuber disease. They have low molecular weight. They are smaller in size as compared to viruses. They have only genetic material, that is, they lack a protein coat. And now with prions, prions only have a protein coat, that is, they lack a genetic material. Their protein coat is infectious. They are also called as abnormally folded proteins. Examples are Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in humans and mad cow disease in cattle, which is also called BSE, that is bovine spongiform encephalopathy. And lichens, for general knowledge, you must know that they were found by Theophrastus. It is a symbiotic association between fungi and algae. Fungi is its mycobiont component, algae is its phycobiont component. That is, algae is autotrophic, fungi is heterotropic. Algae does photosynthesis and make food for fungi, whereas fungi provides shelter and absorbs minerals from the water. And lichens are good indicators of air pollution, that is, they will not grow in areas where there is a lot of air pollution. I hope you are all clear with the chapter. If you have any doubt regarding the chapter, I will be more than happy to clear it in the comment section. So make sure you comment your doubts in the comment section. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if so, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any notification. But before that, make sure that you have joined our Telegram channel. For all those who don't know what Telegram is, you can go to the Play Store, search Telegram, and then download the app with this icon. There you can directly search the name of our YouTube channel or click the invite link which is there in the description box. On Telegram, I post the notes of each class in PDF format, so you can either download my notes or make your own notes. But don't go, cause I have a song for you. So that's all for today, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Till then, stay tuned, keep studying, and Jai Hind.